Hi there. Welcome to the live stream broadcast of the Genealogy Researching Your Family Tree MOOC. I'm here with Chris, who's thankfully come along to spend yet another time chatting about her research and what's been happening with her family, dead and alive. So we've gotten a lot of questions from you all on the discussion forum, so we'll be discussing quite a few of those. I just wanted to give kind of a recap of what's been going on the course over the last, well, 3 weeks, I suppose. We've been looking at research techniques, how to think about yourself as a genealogical researcher, getting the best out of records. And now this week, we're moving on to different types of records that one can look at. And this is very much a broad overview of records that are available. I haven't, as you'll know, haven't gone into depth about what you can find for England in 1860, that type of thing. But what I've tried to do is give you the tools to go out and find that specific information if you should need it. I have to say that people on the forums are giving some great tips to one another. So thank you all very much for chipping in and giving your time and expertise. I've also been trying to dip in and give my 2 cents worth wherever I can and add on to those things. So yeah, coming up in the next couple of weeks, next week, we move on to looking at further aspects of genealogical research, considering proof. And then also looking at genetic genealogy. And there's one of the questions from this week that touches on genetic genealogy. So I'll attempt to answer that, but it's definitely not my area of expertise. In the 6th week, we'll have another live stream event, and my colleague Graham Holton will come on, and he's very much in the know when it comes to genetic genealogy. So if you have questions, please put those forward for the 6th week session, and we'll do our best to answer those. So yeah, well, without further ado, and stop burbling on, I'll
look at our first question.
Yeah, we can look at our first question. So moving on from that genetic genealogy question, Gloria Slater was wondering about brick walls. And yes, as we all certainly have brick walls in our family lines. She's having difficulty looking at her paternal great-grandmother, and knows that she worked in Edinburgh in the 1870s, can't find any trace of her birth around 1850. Now, Gloria's DNA tells her that she's 29% Irish, and so she's wondering if that means perhaps that her great-grandmother was from Ireland. Everything that her family records tell her is that she was born in and around Paisley, and so on. So what I will say is that even if you have a percentage, and a large percentage of Irish, and your family is from the west of Scotland, think about the Irish Sea. For large swathes of our existence, the sea was the easiest way to get around, easier than land, and people moved back and forth across that sea from Ireland to Scotland, the Isle of Man, Wales, Cornwall, and then back and forth again. So most of us, well, a large number of us who live in I suppose, the areas surrounded by that circle that is the Irish Sea, have a large percentage of what will be called Irish DNA on the ancestry tests. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though your percentage is coming up with Irish, it doesn't necessarily mean that she was born in Ireland. And what I would suggest doing is looking at parish records. If you haven't already, for that area, you might consider if they were possibly nonconformist, if you're not finding them in parish records. Family Search have some indexes to nonconformist records for Scotland, and Family Search, Scotland's People now has increasing numbers of nonconformist records that you can search. I'm not sure how much they have for the Paisley area, but they do have lists of the different churches that they have within Scotland for non-conformist records. So that's all just come up in the last 7 months. So, and they're continuing to add on. If you're able to go to the archive and the library in Paisley, which is a lovely space, they have some really interesting poor law records, and a lot of people end up being touched by the poor law. But you might contact the archive in Paisley, and that's of course another theme that we've been running through this week is going into your local archive and seeing what they have, or contacting the archive for the area of interest, and seeing what's available, because they are the experts, them and the local family history centers and the local history family history libraries and that kind of thing. So reach out to those people who know what's going on.
And I think the poor law records seem to give it an incredible amount of information. I haven't found anyone to date, but one of the other girls has, and it's very specific about why they came in, what was happening in their family, who they were responsible for, and their situation. So the poor law records are well worth a look.
Yeah, they really are, particularly for Scotland. There was a poor law system in England and Wales as well. Different laws for each of those countries, but the Scottish ones I think are particularly rich, but the English ones are very good as well. There was some discussion on the forums about settlement records, with some of you giving some very useful tips about those. The thing about Scotland is a lot of people tried to stay in their own homes, so you would receive money and stay in your own homes. You wouldn't normally be sent to a workhouse like you were in England and Wales. So there are records available for England and Wales, but they tend not to be quite so rich. But they're certainly available. Yeah, worth a look. And I have to say they're more easily available. Ancestry has quite a few digitized and available. For Scotland, it tends to be you have to go in person to the archive in question. So the Mitchell for Glasgow, etc. So. And then there are places like Edinburgh where they've just destroyed all of the poor law records.
Oh,
yes. So choose your areas wisely. Just a real shame. So, yeah. Do you want to talk about some of the things that's been going on in your research? Or
for me, well, yes, I've had a bit of success. A few brick walls, as everybody has, and then unexpected things sort of happen. I was in the Mitchell. We have a fantastic resource in Glasgow, the Mitchell Library, mainly for the Glasgow area, and then the wider borough. It's sort of Partick and Govan, and very helpful people up on the 5th floor. I recommend a visit. And we were in there. We were doing research for one of the bowling clubs, and I was looking up the name Patterson, which is my maiden name. I thought I'll just have a look, and although we're not Glasgow people, or we weren't in those days, I'll have a look. And I came up with the most wonderful document. Book. I'll just hold this up. I don't think you'll be able to see it very well, but this is the front page, the cover of a book, and it is the trust fund for my great grandfather, Gavin Patterson.
Wow.
Gavin Patterson, who married Lizzie Riepenhausen.
Right.
And I couldn't believe it. In fact, when I had a good browse through and I had to hand it back in, I said to Michael behind the desk, I don't want to give you this back. It's mine. But it lists everything, even the things that he had in his house. So I'm busy now trying to see all these bits and pieces, Parisian figures under shade. Has anybody got those?
Right.
I've got a wonderful list of the paintings that he owned and then where all the land went. But because I had done this, I actually discovered I had a breakthrough of a brick wall.
Okay.
I found in there that this gentleman had owned quite a few horses. And in our possession, we have a jockey's silks. And this is my nephew in the jockey's silks. And my father always said, oh, yes, he had the winner of the Scottish Grand National, but you think maybe that's one of the stories that you hear.
Yep.
But because found this book and I was researching different bits and pieces, as you do, you suddenly find yourself coming at a brick wall from a different angle. And I found the record of this great-grandfather winning the Scottish Grand National on a horse in 1903 called Chit Chat. It wasn't the favourite. And I then looked on YouTube. It was at Bogside Racecourse, which is now not a racecourse. It's just rough land round about the sea. Yeah. And someone has flown a drone round the old track. I could hear my great-grandfather cheering that horse on. So that was a satisfaction for that brick wall. And this treasure that, I don't know, I probably would never have found it if I hadn't been doing other research. So it's amazing what you can find when you're not seriously looking.
Yeah. How great. So that's a family story that actually ended up being true.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And we still have the silks.
Yeah.
So I've told my nephew he
brilliant.
has to take care of them because we actually do have a horse called Chit Chat.
That's wonderful.
That one, I know, that's just great.
So do you have any current horse owners in your family?
No, we don't.
No. Oh, well.
No, we don't. This great grandfather was from a farming family in Ayrshire, and he didn't want to go into the farming, so he became a draper in a tiny little village. And when his father died, he and his mother moved to Greenock to be with family. And he was just an entrepreneur. He borrowed money, went to Manchester, bought a load of fabric, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. Great. And you'll hear more about Chris's Patterson side of the family. I think it's coming up next week. We start delving into that side of the family. So that's a little teaser.
Yes.
Don't tell anyone.
That's who married Lizzie Riepenhausen.
Okay.
Now, she was the second wife.
Yes. Good. Great. Oh, that's very exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah. Good. Great stuff. Right. Let's see. Let's take a couple more questions here. Now, three of you, I was going to say a number, I suppose three is a number of you, are curious about finding information on divorce and records in the UK primarily. So that's the information that I've looked up to find. And yes, it is possible to get information on divorce records. It's a fascinating history about divorce in the United Kingdom, different for Scotland than for England. And both countries, thankfully, although England a bit more, have access to divorce records reasonably easy. So I'll start with England first, and excuse me a second, I'll grab my little bits of paper because I want to make sure I get the dates exactly right. So for England and Wales, divorce really wasn't possible for people up until 1858. Before that, you had to get an act of parliament, and it was a private member's action that went through parliament. So exceedingly difficult to get. Only a small number of people managed to get that. But after 1958, divorces were more possible. I have to say more open to men than women. Men could file for divorce if the woman, if there was adultery, but a woman wanting to divorce had to prove adultery plus something else. So things like being treated poorly. I'm not coming up with the correct language here, but so it was an extra step for a woman. So where you can find these records is the National Archives, which is based down in Kew, which is right outside of London, has a catalog called Discovery, and on their catalog you can search by name for both the person who sued for divorce, the respondent, so the person who was not suing for divorce, and if you had to prove adultery, so up until a certain point. So there was usually this name of the co-respondent who was the person with whom something else went on, whether it was something else for real or you hear these stories of people nipping away to Brighton and having the fake weekend away and having someone burst in on them and that kind of thing.
So that information was not just kept by the lawyer that you would employ for the divorce.
Yeah,
that would be in the courts.
Yeah, because the whole process was a court process, right. So it had to be heard.
If you look at the court records,
that's right. So it's the court records that you're looking at. So on the catalog, what you'll find is not very much information on the actual catalog record, but you will see that there is a divorce case file existent, and you get just a bit of information. Now, if you then want to go and see those actual case records, like the information that was put before the court, and potentially some of the testimony that was taken, then I've just actually discovered that Ancestry has a database that has this information in it. It runs from 1858 up to 1916. And this is for England and Wales. No, it stops at 1916 because of privacy issues. There's a 100-year cutoff on that. What the National Archives say is that for survival rates of divorce case files, which is what you're looking at on Ancestry, the survival rate's almost 100% from 1858 up until 1916 when
So no lost records.
Yeah, well, it says
That's
almost
great.
100%.
Gosh, that's good.
That's very good.
Yeah.
So what you might find will vary by case. I've seen divorce records where there are photographs, testimony taken, all sorts of things. So yeah, go on and have a look. That's pretty incredible. Actually, I didn't know that Ancestry had this.
And really for
collection.
England.
That's for England and Wales.
England and Wales.
Yeah,
so
England and
Scotland
Wales.
you would have to maybe go to.
Yes, so Scotland's a different case. In
Right.
Scotland, we have different laws than down in England. So Scotland, we've had divorce for much longer. my husband will be not so glad to know. But no, divorce was possible in Scotland back to the 1500s. So from the time of the Reformation, which is 1560, in Scotland, divorce was technically possible. And that was civil divorce as well, both for adultery and for, I think, what is this, 4 years desertion. That's from 1573. So pretty darn, I mean, that's much more open,
Much
than,
more
much
flexible.
flexible
Yeah.
than the English system. Obviously, you had to be able to pay for, to be able to
right.
put the action forward. So it wasn't everybody that actually went through a formal divorce process, but a MSc student of mine last year was looking at bigamy cases, female bigamy cases in the 19th century, and she was quite surprised by the number of people who clearly didn't have much money who were putting forward divorce cases, but also a number of people who obviously weren't going through that process and then had a bigamous second marriage. And that's a huge topic, which somebody else touched on in the questions. And there's a great book that I'll come back to about that. So if you're wanting to find the Scottish divorce records, then it's a bit more difficult than for England and Wales.
Right.
Ancestry doesn't have a database. However, you can go to the National Records of Scotland catalog and search on their catalog, again, by the names, so the name of the person who's petitioned and the respondent. Now, in Scotland, married women, for legal purposes, kept their maiden names. So this is why on Scottish records you'll often see Jeannie Campbell, known as MacDonald. Well, Jeannie Campbell is actually her maiden name, and then also known as MacDonald. That's her married name. So it's, again, often why you see, well, another reason why you see widows going back and using their maiden name. So if you're looking for people on wills, census records, and you know they're a widow, look for them under their maiden name, because they might have reverted back to that. It's a real traditional Scottish thing to happen. So, so National Records of Scotland, go onto their catalog, type in the names of the people, or one of the names that you're interested in, see if there's a catalog record, and if there is, then fortunately what you're going to need to do is either, well, come up to Edinburgh and have a look in the National Archive case files. Many of them are older ones, pre-1984, are kept at the National Records for Scotland. So they've not been digitized and made available online. But again, they can be absolutely incredible sources of information. I worked with a woman whose grandparents were divorced, and the woman went off to America. No, she went off to Canada and vanished, basically. And so looked at their divorce. I found out about children she didn't know existed. There were photographs of really, I mean, heartrending, horrible dialogue between him, anyway, it's just really, you get a total sense of the people involved, because you're reading their actual words.
Yes.
So yeah, any court records are really fascinating for that, because you do often get that transcription of what's actually being said in the court. So that's a good, court records in general are a good resource. So that's divorce records. Obviously, that's just for the United Kingdom. Yeah. Other countries will have their own access to divorce records, so we don't have time to go through that. But somebody else next live stream, ask about another country, and I'll try to answer that. Oh, the resource that I was going to talk about for divorce records. So there's a woman called Rebecca Probert, and again, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see that, has written 2 books for genealogists. She's a professor of law down in England, and this is her first book that she wrote, which is Marriage Law for Genealogists, the Definitive Guide. And it's a fabulous guide for England and Wales only, about what goes on in marriage law, and all of these changes in the law, that kind of thing. She recently followed that up with another book called Married, Bereaved, and Divorced, something like that. Bigamous. Anyway, it's about divorce records, bigamy, and it's a great book. I forgot to bring it in today, but Rebecca Probert is the name on that. So, yeah, she's excellent. So, and you said you hadn't found any divorce.
No, nobody.
In records.
Well, nobody's owning up to being divorced. Yeah. In fact, I haven't really found any. I found quite a few people with a second marriage because the first wife had died.
Yeah.
But no one that had been divorced.
Yeah. And obviously, in one of the examples that I've given, there's a man who has a bigamous marriage on the course. So, yeah, but it certainly happened.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, good. Yeah, court records, always a good thing.
Hadn't thought of that one.
Yeah, definitely. Before I go on to another question, do you have anything?
Well, there was a lovely question about my organisation skills.
Yes.
Is that who was that?
Yes, that was Helen McCarthy.
Oh, thank you, Helen.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry. The organisation skills was Peter Webb.
Oh, Peter.
Yes.
Peter, but Helen is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Peter, when I did the course, we had this wonderful book given to us that I think Tahisha has mentioned several times, the family record. So these are my family sheets. And mine is now full, up to date and cross-referenced to my file, and that's been an absolute godsend. And then I had to do another one because in the case of Gavin Patterson, I know you won't be able to see the writing, but I have a page for Gavin Patterson and his first wife, who died, and then Gavin Patterson and my great-grandmother Lizzie Riepenhausen, because it's easier to see them side by side. Because obviously, when his first wife died, his second wife actually looked after the children, and I've been finding out more about the children from this side of the marriage and how they linked and how they all got on. So these books have been, but what was missing for me was a research log, because you must know what it's like. You'll start off on the computer, just look up one thing, and sort of 10 minutes later, you're way down on another website somewhere else, and you've printed off all these bits of information, but then you can't remember where you were. So I made a research log.
Great.
And I think Tahisha's going to put a copy on one of the pages, just to sort of, with the information that birth, marriage, death, and then where you've been and what you've found out. And to code this, and I think to have this thing about coding, to code this, I've used the Annan-Tafel method, which is just a way of numbering all your ancestors backwards, and it actually works quite well. And again, you might not be able to see it so well, but this is the Annan-Tafel of my family. So everybody has a number that I then write on here, so I can cross-reference quite quickly, where they are and who they are, and keep the records. So that's where I'm up to with my development. But sometimes you sort of think, you look behind you and your entry is full of all these bits to be filed, but you're so excited about what you're doing, that has to wait till second. But it does help to be a bit organized. You can't be perfectly organized when you're doing genealogy, because there's too much cross-referencing. You want birth marriage for one person and they're in 2 different files. And I do have files on the computer. The person that I'm tending to focus on, I have a separate file, and I copy birth marriage records, any photographs in, so that the originals are still in the original file, and then I've got a working file on that person. So yes, it's still a bit of a mix of everything, but this is something where you've got your family record sheet. I think is essential.
Everything corralled in one place. So I'd say that Annan-Tafel that Chris has created was made in a family tree software program that she's using. So
the Annan-Tafel, I think, is quite a well-known genealogy tool. It's Annan, H-N-E-N, Annan, T-A.
Tafel,
T-A-F-E-L-E,
Yeah, it's from the German.
T-A-F-E-L, German, yes, ancestor list. That's just been because everyone will know if you say, oh, the Anam Tafel number is this, then you kind of know which generation you're talking about.
Yeah. We cover a bit of this in week 6.
All right.
So, yeah. So don't worry, we'll get there. So yeah, great. Yeah, and I will put up the research log that Chris has talked about.
And then you just adapt it to suit yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of these tools, definitely go ahead and adapt them to what works for you. So yeah. Right. Okay. We've got a couple of questions that are coming in through you all who are watching live. Bonnie Tarnack's asking about the recording of adoption cases in Scotland. So official adoption didn't start in Scotland until 1930. So you won't find anything, official in the state kept records until 1930, and there is information that's available, but you have to apply for that information. Again, the National Records of Scotland website has some information about how to go about doing that, and I believe you have to be the person involved or possibly a descendant, although there's been some discussion about that. I'm not sure where they've gotten to with that decision. And then following on from that, actually, Mike Young has a question about the website for Scotland's national records. I must admit, I can't remember the web address off the top of my head, but I know that if you Google National Records of Scotland, it will come up. I know it's NRS, but I just don't remember it off the top of my head. And then he's wondering about within that website, where do you actually find the search fields? The main web page will come up, and then there will be some links that discuss the catalog or searching for records, or I think there's also some links for different types of people who are using the website. So if you're a researcher, if you're wanting to get married, so go to the space that says researcher, and you'll find links to the catalog or search for records.
And what do you mean by the catalog?
So it's like a library catalog, or
so what they're holding.
Yeah, what they're holding. Yes. Yeah, it's a way to search for what they're holding. So archives and libraries both have catalogs, and oftentimes they're online, so that are available everywhere. So hopefully that will allow you to find that resource. So it's a good one. So they don't have digitized records available. What they will tell you is if the record exists at the National Records of Scotland, and then you can contact them.
But I do think we're lucky in Scotland with Scotland's People records. I mean, that has just been I think I must have spent a fortune. It's wonderful to have a digitized copy of the actual document. I mean, even the census records, just to see who was living beside them and what the occupation was, you kind of get an idea, and then to try and find the address on Google Maps and see whether it's still there or whether it's gone, and then to actually go and look. That's just been amazing. So Scotland's People we are lucky.
Yes, you are lucky. Yes. Not having any Scottish ancestors myself.
Yes.
I'm actually like, I need to find them.
I know.
But they're so far not out there. So yes. Okay, let's get a couple more things in. Now, Helen McCarthy, she was the one who had the question about being new to her research, time consuming to research. She's feeling like she's concentrating on the recent past, and that she's never going to finish the 2 or 3 generations that she's wondering about if she should get going on distant lines or what, and was curious about what we thought. So, and I thought you had a really nice answer.
Well, that's a difficult one, Helen. I think I started in Tahisha's classes at Strathclyde as an absolute novice, and sort of quickly got fired up because was finding some wonderful information. And then I sort of realized, actually, I don't want to rush to go back, because you can't visualize these people, and it's very hard to trace any documents about them, and quite often the information is correct. Is incorrect, that you find that, that Harry or Harry McCandlish, who's in my family, way back, there's several links that could be mine or could not be mine. So, and I wouldn't rush it if they were still finding out things about the last 3 living sorry, in memory generations. Stick with that until you're comfortable. I think birth, marriage, and death is the main one, and then the census record. And I feel like you, Helen, I feel we're writing, we're a little group all from Tahisha's class. When the class is finished, we formed a group and we present. So it's maybe once every 6 months you have to, and that makes you write.
Yeah.
And I'm writing about Gavin Patterson. And while I'm doing that, nothing else is happening. But I'm not worrying too much because I am fleshing him out. You know, I go to the second-hand bookshops and around everywhere to buy everything. And, you know, so this is a wonderful book about Greenock. And in it, I found a photograph of the shop.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
that's been interesting. Yeah. And now that I found this book about Gavin Patterson, I think I'll be with Gavin for a long time. So I think it's a question of what you really want to do. Yeah. When you say, "Oh, I'm doing my family tree," people say, "How far back have you gone?" Yeah. And I keep thinking, well, actually, I'm not interested in going back to the 16th century, the 17th century, because they're not real. They're just, so the last 3 generations of living memory, I think, can be real. You can see where they were. You can often find their graves. That's a real awe moment. Yeah. So yes. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. All I would say is keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think anything you do that you're enjoying is great.
I want to find out what they wore. You know, what the transport was like, so that all these bits and pieces are helping.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, that leads on quite nicely to a question that someone else had about conditions for U.S. immigrants in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This is Ellie Fryer had folks moving to Cleveland, Ohio, which interestingly enough is a place that some of my ancestors moved to. But what I would suggest is look at newspapers. There are a lot of newspapers that have been digitized for areas in the States, and the Library of Congress website. Again, if you Google Library of Congress, the website will pop up. I know it's loc.gov. That one's easy. But there's a great section on there that's free for digitized newspapers from the States. And you can just search on Ohio, you can just search on Cleveland, look up the newspapers for that and just read the newspapers. I mean, that will give you a great sense of the adverts and all things that are available. I also often look at websites for historical societies and see if they have any ideas of books to read that are set in the local area. I have to admit to reading a lot of historical fiction, which, you know, sometimes authors of historical fiction do a great job researching and you get a really good sense. You have to take all that stuff with a grain of salt, but I love reading historical fiction. I also tried looking at maps of the time period, and again, the Library of Congress website has some good maps. They also have things like personal narratives and just digitized images to try to get a sense. Those kind of things are places that I would start with that type of thing. And again, I think week 5 we'll talk more about adding, I suppose, more secondary material, if you like, kind of a historical bent onto things. So we've just got a couple more minutes, so I just wanted to quickly get to a couple of other questions that were asked. Let's see, Anne Cross asked about finding the use of a residential property in the 1940s and 30s in Glasgow. Some great links to directories, to business directories, local directories were given in the forum. So thanks to David McFarland for those. Those directories can be found on the Internet Archive, but also on the National Library of Scotland's webpage. I'd also be tempted to look at the valuation rolls, which deal with basically property taxation. And just to see if any business use for the property is listed. It might not be if, you know, they're kind of running it under the radar, but, you know, it would tell you who owned the property, though. It would. It doesn't tell you, it doesn't give you a lot of other information, but it tells you who owned it and who the tenant was. So you would maybe find out who owned the property at the time. Yeah, definitely. And it does often list the description of the property. So if it was a house, let's see some examples I found were house, shop, bank office, baker's shop. So you don't get a lot of information, but it may be that exists. So the valuation roll for 1930 is available on Scotland's People. So yeah, and you can search by person name, or you can look by address as well.
What about the Seaseams?
You could, but that would really be if they actually owned the property.
Ah, yes,
so yeah,
yes.
and those aren't digitized, so they're
No, they're not.
difficult to
No.
get. And right, okay, just a couple more quick things here. A couple more minutes. Somebody asked about naturalization records, which I think I'm probably going to need to actually put stuff up on the forum about. But just quickly, Family Search has some naturalization records for New Jersey. This was Linda W. was asking about naturalization records for the U.S. Anyway, I'll put up some information. That's in a image-only record, so you can't actually search. But what you would need to do is kind of know the area in which your people live, because up until, what was it, 1906, it was a process that could be handled by county courts, by state court, or by federal courts. So a lot of times people went to their local county court to deal with the naturalization, because why would you travel if you didn't need to? So on this New Jersey section, I've actually looked at these about a year ago for somebody. They're arranged by county, but then you have to go through year by year, and it's a case of just getting lucky. But they are digitized and they're up there. So you could also look in a census to see if a person had indicated that they were naturalized. So the 1900, 1910, and 1920, 1930 censuses. I know your people passed away. Thank you. We've got 3 minutes left. And Marie D asked a question about obtaining records for pre-census times. Our parish church, the only kinds of records that existed before census came in. And I would say what you're going to find will depend on the area and the wealth of the family.
Yeah.
But what you might look at, consider things like military records, apprenticeship records, taxation records, newspaper records, poor law records, wills. There's and I was asked court records as well. So just think about where a person might have interfaced with society, the state, and think about what types of records were created. There's a lot out there. So, right. That was great.
It's been quick.
Yeah, it was has. The time always goes by really quickly. It's always great fun. So thank you all for taking part. We really both appreciate it very much, and thank you, Chris, to being here.
You're welcome, and happy hunting.
Yes, definitely. Continue on the course. As I said, we'll have another live stream on week 6, and I'll be here with Graham Holton. We'll discuss some DNA issues and any other questions that come up. So look out for that forum on the 6th week. You can add more questions. But in the meantime, have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. And I'll look forward to being back on the course with you soon. So thanks very much.
Thank you.